and we're here for season 2. We decided to come back in July. I'm Izac with Fun Football Podcast. I got my co-host Med.
Hey Izac, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm excited. I'm honestly excited just to be back and doing video again. I've been waiting for this. We got football this week. That's the first time we've been able to say that since almost 6 months. So we've got a couple of awesome guest hosts. Peter, who's been on the show before. Peter, how are you doing,
everybody? Doing well. Hoping we get this before the storms start hitting here again, because you gotta love Chicago weather. But other than that, good.
Very good. And we have Ken Crippen from Football Learning Academy, and we are honored to have you here with us, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Pretty good, man. I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to be back. This has been me and Meta, I think, have been kind of itching to get back at this, so we're excited. What I wanted to do to kick off, why don't you tell everybody about, I mean, this is a multifaceted question, but tell everybody where to find your podcast and a little bit about the Football Learning Academy.
Well, the best place to find everything associated with the Football Learning Academy is going to our website, www.football-learning-academy.com. So you'll see a listing of all the podcast episodes there, listing of all the social media links that we have for the FLA, any of the classes that we're offering, the interviews that we have there. Everything can be found at that website. So a little bit of background on the Football Learning Academy. It's an online school teaching pro football history. And what we're doing is trying to put today's game into historical context. So being able to see what's happening today and relate it to how the game has evolved over 100 years plus, talking about the players, the teams, things like that. But what we also want to be able to do is to raise money to be able to help retired players in need. So that's something that's very important to me. I've spent a lot of time talking with retired players, and I'm guessing we're going to get into all that here throughout the episode. But they've been very good to me over the years, and I want to be able to give back to them, especially when I'm talking to these players and you just hear it in their voices as far as the struggles that they're facing, medical bills, not being able to pay the medical bills, cognitive decline, things like that. I mean, it's just heartbreaking talking to these players, and they're struggling to remember what happened last week, remember their playing career, things like that. So it's something I'm very passionate about, is raising money for those retired players. And that's one of the reasons why I formed the FLA, is to not only educate people on the history of the game, but also have a platform to raise money to help those players.
Which is great. I mean, like when I hear stories like Brett Favre couldn't remember games, I've heard that from multiple players, and I stopped playing when I was in high school, and I still have bad knees in part because of it and Pop Warner. But no, it's you sacrifice your body, and the NFL unfortunately doesn't really give back enough. So I think I commend you on starting that. When did you decide to start it?
It was probably about 3 years ago when I took it seriously to be able to form it. It's something where I've always wanted to teach pro football history, but it was about 3 years ago when I started putting everything into motion, setting up the company, setting up all the infrastructure, and then it was 2 years ago when we launched. So fairly young, but there's a lot of stuff that I've been doing over the decades that have helped to form what is now the Football Learning Academy.
Awesome. Very cool. Okay, I've got a lot more, but I don't want to steal all the questions and all the conversation. Med, I know Peter's got some as well. Med, I'm going to kick it to you, man.
Well, and like you talked about earlier, you know, with the whole cognitive thing, especially, I definitely understand how that was. I played a little bit after high school and had a few concussions that I deal with still to this day. And the fact that you've actually took it upon yourself to actually do this for the players that a lot of people have forgotten about in a lot of ways, I think it's really commendable that you are a true football historian that kind of is like a window to the past where someone can look back and really, in my opinion, see the game for what it was. You know, there's the game that they see now, but you know, I think one thing I actually tweeted out the other day is, you know, why does defenses not have the cool nicknames they had back in yesteryear. Purple people eaters, the steel curtain, the no-name defense of Miami Dolphins. I mean, it was a time when players actually, once you got drafted to a team, you stayed with them, and pretty much almost throughout your whole career. One question I have for you, and and I just was thinking about this because of one of my followers brought it up, is there a guy right now that's not in the Hall of Fame that you would say that they should be? And if you want to say someone like Jim Marshall, I can understand.
I'm gonna make Isaac very happy here. I'm gonna pick a Packer, but Laverne Dilwig is my number one guy. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a big fan of Laverne Dilwig and feel that he absolutely belongs. You got somebody that's an 8-time All-Pro, 6-time consecutive consensus All-Pro, 4-time consecutive unanimous All-Pro. There's only one pre-modern era end that was able to come close to that, and that was Don Hudson. So if you are second to one of the all-time greats of an entire era, how can you not be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame? Then you start looking at the statistics that are available. 27 interceptions from a guy that played the defensive end position. You look at the other pre-modern era ends that are in the Hall of Fame, ignore Hudson because he played safety. He didn't play defensive end. They had single digits. Dilwig was able to be athletic enough to not only penetrate into the offensive backfield to make plays, but also drop back into coverage and get 27 interceptions. So you're talking somebody who absolutely dominated. And when you've got Hall of Famers saying that he was the best end that I ever went up against, or the best player that played during his era, how can you not have that person in the Hall of Fame? And you're talking about media people. Media people say that they're the most qualified to be able to pick who belongs in the Hall of Fame because they watch these people play. The media people of the time picked him as the best end prior to Hudson. So if the media people are the ones that say that they are most qualified, how can you not listen to the media people of the time who watched him play to say that he was the best at his position? So to me, the case is easy, but current committee is more interested in the current players than they are players of the past. And that's why chances of him getting in there are probably slim to none.
Yeah, and you're right on that. I mean, you look at some of the players, like, I mean, Cliff Harris just recently went into the Hall of Fame, and I actually had the honor of actually going to Canton to watch my favorite quarterback of all time, Peyton Manning, get inducted. And, when you look at, like, one of the things that you and your guest on episode 203, Chris Berman, talked about, that Pittsburgh is literally just a stone throws away. And when they came there, man, it felt like Three Rivers Stadium all over again. You had all the terrible towels going and everything like that. And when Cliff Harris actually got on there, and even Drew Pearson, who got inducted, well, they did like 2 back-to-backs because, of course, the COVID stuff happened. So they couldn't do one of the inductions. So they did 2. Mm-hmm. And I was very lucky for that. But, it was just when they got on the stage, of course, everyone started, and then it was definitely one of those atmospheric moments. And plus, we also had the Cowboys and the Steelers playing in that Hall of Fame game, so that was truly amazing.
Yeah, and you see Bills fans, you're not too far from Buffalo going to Canton. So, yeah, you get Steelers going in there, you get Buffalo Bills going in there, and they're going to show up and be present. So, yeah, like you said, it is definitely an experience when you're there, when one of those teams have a player getting inducted.
And if I remember correctly, you are a Bills fan. Am I right?
That is correct. I am a Buffalo Bills fan.
It's very cool. Peter, I feel like I'm stealing some thunder. You go ahead.
Oh, no. You're absolutely good. I've got mine geared towards specific players with that. So we're good still. No worries.
Sorry, guys. Kiddo.
Oh, you're good. And, I got a few other questions and everything, and I did my homework on you. Like, I know that you wrote a couple books. I
Mhm.
know that you contributed to a couple books.
Right.
One I
And
want to ask about,
you
but I
know,
want to ask about all of them. But
yeah, I figured that you would too. And I mean, one of the people that you actually interviewed, and I'm probably going to butcher his last name, but I know who he is Gino
Gino
Marcetti.
Marchetti.
Yeah, Marchetti.
Mhm.
And that was actually something that I thought was really cool. And a lot of people really talk about how Red Grange was the reason why the NFL got saved when he went on his barnstorming tour, where they played 8 games in 12 days from Florida to the West Coast. And another question I would actually have for you is, as far as the second most important thing that happened for the NFL, would you say that possibly either the greatest game that was ever played with the 1958 championship game between the Colts and the Giants would be up there, or would the merger of the AFL and NFL in 1967?
I would say the 58 game is probably one because it got so much exposure and really brought fans into the game itself. The merger of the AFL, NFL was definitely up there. The merger with the All America Football Conference, I say, is up there. I mean, if you really want to see how the NFL was able to survive, there's a couple of time periods when it really looked like it was going to fail. So you had the 1920s, especially the 1926 season, where Red Grange formed the AFL, and that almost bankrupted the NFL. But then you also look during the war years. A lot of those teams were struggling during those years. And when you're competing against somebody of the caliber of the All America Football Conference, they almost bankrupted each other in trying to do that. And that's what forced that merger. So bringing all of that talent from the All America Football Conference, a lot of those players were coming back from being deployed overseas. Combine that with just now a single league, and you're not having to compete against another major league. I think that's something that really solidified the NFL in order to be able to set them up to be able to survive 10 years against the American Football League. That was another time where they were really struggling. They were hammering each other, and it was difficult for them to survive. So that was another forced merger just for survival's sake. But I would also point to, the All-America Football Conference and the NFL merging in 1950, if you want to call it a merger. It really wasn't. But that to me was, I'd say, a very pivotal moment in order to be able to set things up for the 58 game, in order to be able to set things up to compete against the AFL in the 1960s. And, then you had labor strife going through 70s, 80s, 90s, et cetera. So a lot of moments that you can point to, but I think you highlighted some of the major ones.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And who could forget the carpets?
Yeah, you can't forget the carpets. So for people to reference with that, basically the Chicago Cardinals and the Pittsburgh Steelers merged for a single season. They were called the Card Pits for Cardinals and Pittsburgh, but the nickname was they were the Carpets because they were so bad everybody was walking all over them. So
a little bit of history for you right there, folks.
That was great. I knew a decent amount of that, but that was amazing. Thank you, Ken and Med. That was great. Peter, what you got, man?
First one, because I've actually started writing here and there between poetry and other stuff. With having authored and co-authored the number of books that you have, if someone were starting out as an author, what tips or advice would you have for them?
Biggest thing is just write. A lot of people are struggling to get started with writing because they figure, well, my stuff's not going to be at the caliber of somebody who's been published before. Forget about all that. The best thing you can do is just start writing. And then you're always going to improve. Everything that you write is going to be better than the last thing that you wrote. So you just have to keep at it. Just keep working at it. Have other people take a look at it, review it, study other authors that you enjoy reading, see their style, see how they put things together. Try to get a mentor. That's another thing you can do is if you know somebody that is willing to maybe help you out, review the stuff that you're working on, do it. But I'd say do everything you can, get some stuff published. It just snowballs after that. As you keep doing it. I wrote my first articles, I don't know, over 30 years ago, had it published. felt great. Made me want to write more. So I just kept going and going and going. I now have hundreds of articles that are published. You know, you mentioned about the books and contributions and stuff like that. So it just gotta get started. That's the biggest thing.
Sounds like
that's
you're
awesome.
starting a podcast.
What's that?
It sounds different, but similar to starting a podcast and how much work that is.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same concept where you just go out there and just start doing it. You're going to make mistakes in the beginning. You're going to find ways to make it better, but the more you do it, the more you're going to say, "Hey, maybe if I did it this way, it would be easier on me, or it would sound better. The audience would like it more." You just have to do it. It's lots of practice, and that's how you just continually get better.
Screaming children in the background is always a really good background noise. So this is the first time too. I did this for a year, and this is the first time she's been. She's just has a lot of energy today. 5-year-old. She's about to start kindergarten. So, no, but that does sound similar to starting a podcast. Like when me and Med looked back at Med started before I did last year, and we both listened back to our first shows, and it was man, it is like night and day. The thing, like and we still have a long way to go, but the things that you see in the beginning, you nailed it, Ken. You just have to start it. So very good. You know what? I have plenty of questions. Peter, do you want to hit him with another one though?
Yeah. Also, I know they had said it, but I did want to say you guys are doing awesome work with that Learning Academy, because I'd actually had the honor of being able to interact with Steve McMichael a few times when he was doing radio and such here in suburban Chicago, and just seeing what he's going through with them having to bring Canton to him this year is like heartbreaking, but I'm glad they're willing to do it that way for him as well, because it's been a long time coming and he's definitely deserved it. So thank you very much for what you guys are doing for players like that.
Thank you.
So your opinion, and this is one I love getting, especially historical opinions on, who would you say are the best 5 wide receivers of all time?
Ooh, good question.
Top 3 is pretty easy. You've got Jerry Rice, Don Hudson, Randy Moss. From there, it gets a little more difficult. You'd probably have to put not necessarily these are all going to be the part of the 5 and in no particular order. I mean, you got to put Terrell Owens up there. You got to put Calvin Johnson up there. Yeah, I mean, those would probably be the 5 that I would think of right off the bat, but I know there's people that I'm missing that I'm not thinking of right now off the top of my head. So I know I'm going to get ripped on social media for that, but it comes with the territory.
Yeah.
Anytime I say anything controversial on Twitter, it just goes.
Yeah, it's like, how did you not think of this person? I was like,
the one everybody brings up is Larry Fitzgerald, and I got to watch him. I lived in Arizona, and I think Med hit this. I don't want to steal Med's point. Med's the one who made this point that with better quarterback play, he would have easily been it would have been solidified in the top 5. He would have replaced one of those guys. He's probably my next one. I like your 5 though.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think Fitzgerald is up there, and you can easily make an argument to put him in top 5. You can do the woulda, shoulda, coulda as far as, well, if you had better quarterbacks, it's like, well, a lot of other people, if they had better quarterbacks too, they'd be better. So you can definitely make that argument for a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, Fitzgerald is definitely a great receiver, and he deserves all the props he's going to get going into Canton soon.
Yeah, that's interesting. Izac also had mentioned that one specifically because him and I have talked about this before, and I actually have Fitzgerald ranked 2nd on mine all time. So
that's pretty high, man. But yeah, I mean, I'm just happy that you threw Don Hudson up there, because
it's Don Hudson.
If it's not, Sterling Sharp didn't play long enough, but even I still maintain he should be in the Hall of Fame, but he didn't play long enough. So.
Yeah, I think he's going to get there. He's getting more momentum. So I definitely think that Sterling Sharp's going to get there, especially with the committee focusing on more recent candidates. Yeah. He's got a better shot. And then, you're going to see a lot of the older players just dropping out of consideration.
Plus, you've had some guys that haven't played, that have played even less time. So I'm hoping you're right. I think he deserves to be in there. That's just my Packer and me. There's a lot of players. But, Med, I'm going to go last on this round. What you got next, Med?
So like you said earlier, you had 30 years of experience doing this, 203 episodes of your podcast. You have a a website that, as a former coach also, I kind of really enjoyed going through, and I will be looking at some of your courses. So I definitely want to go more into this route. But typically with what you're doing, you'd give a lot. So the one thing I want to ask you is, like, out of all your interviews, everything that you've done, we'll just say interviews, what has given you the most back as far as a particular interview or questionnaire?
Wow, that's a tough one. Because each interview you were able to pull something out of it.
Yes, sir.
I would say I definitely enjoyed the Gino Marchetti that we had mentioned earlier, but we're talking about one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. I would say my interview with Mick Tinglehoff. He was suffering from dementia at the time, and you can definitely tell. I had talked to one of his teammates prior to that, and he said, yeah, he's not the same Mick that I've known for a while when he saw him recently. And so when I interviewed him, you can tell, because whenever somebody's having memory challenges, they're always going to have short answers and it's not going to go into a lot of detail. And so he was doing that. But the moment that stuck out for me was he had his grandchildren there visiting him. And one of the grandkids, I guess, ran into the room while I was talking to Mick on the phone. And you can just hear it in his voice that he just smiled and he was just very happy because his grandchild had just walked in. So the rest of the interview, didn't get a lot of information, but to sit there and have that connection with somebody and say, how can I not help out these players when you're going through stuff like that? I had another interview where he couldn't even form a sentence. It was just essentially garbling, and his wife had to translate everything for me, saying that, I think this is what he's talking about. I think this is what he's talking about. It's just something that hits you. And you bring up, I had for the Chicago Bears fans, interviewed Ed Sprinkle. He was very far into Alzheimer's at that point. I was working everything out with his daughter in order to try to get the interview. And she said, he's got good times and bad times. When he's got the good time, I'm going to call you and you have to do the interview right then and there. And that's exactly what happened. She called me up and says, do it now. And I was able to get the interview. And you can see, he was struggling, but I was able to have some sort of a conversation with him. But, those are the types of things that really hit you. And, I'm going to say it like I said it before. How can I not do something to try to help these players, especially since they're going out of their way to help me?
Yeah, and when you say that, it makes me think, a couple months ago, I actually found out that my dad had an invite to the Atlanta Falcons back in 1972. And at the time, when you work in construction, a lot of people, they don't realize how much money the league makes now as opposed to then. And he got an offer for, I think it was just be on the practice squad for just a few months for $15,000 for that year, which, in the 1970s, I mean, that's like I would say 300,000 now. And, he really contemplated it, doing that or staying home and being a dad. And he ended up staying home and being a dad. But like you said, I mean, a lot of times the players back then, the Packers from the 1930s, they actually would go work at the meat packing plant after they were done. In fact, that was what most of the players were workers from that factory at first. So it's, it's really admirable that what you're doing is the benefit to players that a lot of people in most cases forgot about. So
I appreciate that. And I'll relay one story similar to what you had mentioned. I had interviewed Dr. Jim Alinger, who played for the 1924 Buffalo Bisons in the very early NFL.
Wow.
And he was a dentist in the off season, and they were worried about him playing football because if he injured his hands, he couldn't be a dentist. And so that he only played one season, but still he played against Jim Thorpe. He played against some of the greats. So to be able to hear those stories is great. But, again, that historical context of these guys had jobs outside of playing football. They played football on Saturdays or Sundays, and then they had regular jobs during the week. And so if you got hurt, you couldn't perform your job. And so you could lose your job. And, it got to be difficult for some of those guys. And also, back then, amateurism was lauded, and professionalism, they frowned upon it. And so you would play under assumed names and things like that. So you would line up against somebody and say, yeah, I know you. You're not Joe Smith. But that's the way it was.
Really quick, I hopped on this guy's show yesterday. I'm gonna give him a plug really quick. Out of Pocket. It was so much fun. We talked about the Jordan Love contract and how insane these contracts are right now. It was absolutely crazy, but I had a lot of fun on his show. But Ken, I've got to ask, I didn't see it anywhere. Maybe it was on maybe I missed it. Did you play football as a kid? What was your experience?
I played sandlot football. So I did a lot of that kind of stuff, and I did that all through college, playing against people that were playing on the college team. So a lot of the guys from the football team and I would get together and we just go out and play. So that's, my knowledge of playing football, just going out and doing it. But then, I'd spend a lot of time, especially with this historical scouting reports class, talking with player personnel people. And, say, okay, how do you go about evaluating these people? What are the skills that you're looking for? Things like that. So, I learned under some of the people, and, some of those people are in the Hall of Fame right now. So I think I had some pretty good teachers as far as being able to look at game film and understand what's going on.
Absolutely. Okay, I've got to ask about it. How was writing that 1966 Packers book? That must have been awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that was a lot of fun. That's part of the Professional Football Researchers Association, their Greatest Teams series. So that particular book was all in the 66 Packers. So there was a bunch of people that contributed to that. I contributed to part of that. Being a part of those books is a lot of fun, not only working with other people in the Professional Football Researchers Association, but just having, another contribution talking about one of the great teams of all time. So, yeah, I mean, it's always fun contributing to those. I've got another one that's going to be coming out, part of that series. It's on the 1964 Buffalo Bills. Wrote a chapter for that. So that should be coming out. I think that's coming out next year. So definitely have to look for that.
Very, very cool. Very cool. Awesome stuff, man. You know what? I've got a lot more, but I want to make sure everybody gets their chance to. I know Med was just as, and Peter were just excited to get to talk to you. So, Med, what other questions do you have, man?
Right now, I mean, I'm trying to learn who Ken the Man is right now, because he was talking about sandlot football, and I mean, that's like bringing it back to when you're a kid. That's when you love the game. You love the game for what it was, and everyone really has an inspirational figure and everything. And for you to get in there, I mean, who was the person that inspired you to start doing what you're doing?
I don't know if there was a specific person. It's just something that kind of grew. Being a Bills fan, I was interested in learning more about the history of the team. And so I just started digging back, going back into the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, and then just keep looking back. And I said, hey, there was a Buffalo Bills in the 1940s. So I wanted to learn about that. Then I said, hey, there were some Buffalo teams in the NFL in the 1920s. Started learning about that. And then it just kept going farther and farther back until I got back to the beginning of pro football. And my first book was on the Syracuse Athletic Association. They played from 1890 to 1900. So digging back, learning about the origins of the game and how the game was played, about the people that were playing it, everything that they went through, and then just seeing the evolution of football. That's what really sparked that passion. So I just wasn't able to stop after that. And I just kept writing about it, researching about it. And here I am.
I got to piggyback on Matt's question about the Bills really quick, and then I'll hit Peter. What is your favorite season or seasons of watching or covering the Buffalo Bills that stands out to you? It's kind of a tough one, but
yeah, it is a tough one because
any that stand out.
Yeah, I mean, the best seasons are obviously 64 and 65, but that's slightly before my time. I'm old, but not that old. But out of ones that I've watched, I would have to probably say the 1990 season. So that's when they finally made it to a Super Bowl. Yes, they did lose that, but it was definitely a competitive game. And, even though they did lose, it was heartbreaking that they lost. Seeing the team get to the Super Bowl, not knowing if they were ever going to go back, to me, that was one of the best teams that I saw from the Bills and one of the best seasons that I've watched for the Bills. Fortunately, they did go back 3 more times. They didn't have the same success as the first one. They lost by a lot more, but it's still, you're not going to see many teams go to 4 straight Super Bowls, even though they lost. How many are going to go to 4 straight? You see the Patriots go to 4 straight?
No.
I mean, the only other people that you can say that went to 4 straight would be the Cleveland Browns of the 40s and 50s, where they went to 10 straight championship games. You think about that. We talk about the Patriots being the greatest dynasty of all time, and it took them more than twice the length of time that it took the Browns in order to win those 7 championships, and they couldn't go to 10 straight. So, to me, the Browns are the greatest dynasty of all time. Not taking anything away from the 70 Steelers or from the 49ers or the Cowboys or anything like that. They're great dynasties as well, but how many of them went to 10 straight championship games?
Well, and you got to factor in that the Bills did it in the 90s when there was more teams and the competition was stiffer. And even I know they didn't win one of those, but to get to 4 is crazy. I'm going to be impressed if the Chiefs do it. So it's just, I mean, I know they didn't, like I said, they didn't take one home, but to get there 4 times, and they got insanely close. The season you're talking about specifically. So, Ned, what you got?
So going back to what you were discussing about the Cleveland Browns, I did pick up on a little tidbit that you did during your last episode, and I can see this, but you consider Otto Graham the greatest quarterback of all time. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Go ahead, do history, boss.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the 10 straight championship games, winning 7 of them.
Mm-hmm.
No other quarterback's ever done that. You've got a team that won 29 straight games. 29 straight games without a defeat. So think about that for a second. You go through, lose 1 game in the 1947 season, win the championship. You go through the entire 1948 season, win the championship before the Dolphins did. And then you go into 49 and you win everything but 1 game there. 29 straight games without a defeat. When are you ever going to see that again? And then you take a look at the quality of quarterback play from Otto Graham, just the way that he was able to look through the field. He was able to be incredibly accurate. He had the touch, but he also had the velocity in order to be able to get the ball where he needed to, especially on the long passes. You can see that he could hit it at any range. To me, he's the greatest quarterback of all time. Not taking anything away from Tom Brady, but Otto Graham won the same number of championships in half the time.
Well said.
And some of the numbers that he was able to put up in the year where passing was so much harder. Like, to me, 20 touchdowns then is like 40 plus now. There's no way to, there's no equation to equate it. But back then it was so difficult to throw the ball. So yeah, Otto Graham is definitely one of the greats. Peter?
You can play defense back then. You can't do that now.
No, I'm hoping that the NBA, and I don't really want to transition to a basketball conversation, but the NBA tries this stuff during the regular season, and then during the finals and the playoffs, they revert back to the 90s, 80s style where they let it be more physical. And I'm kind of hoping I know the NFL wants to, and you know this as well as anyone can with the interviews you've had, that they need to focus on player safety, but I think there's a middle ground where they've taken too much away from the defense. I think so I'm hoping that they go back that direction a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, you're probably seeing people get hurt trying not to hurt other people. It's, people are figuring out, how am I supposed to tackle somebody? You got like a window like this on each of the players that you're allowed to touch them. And if you breathe the wrong way, they're going to throw a flag on you. So it's something where it's getting ridiculous. And yeah, you're going to see games like the Arena League where it's going to be, 65-62. That's because you're not allowed to play defense anymore.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't have to play defense like you did in the Hardy Brown days where they're clotheslining you, but still, it's something where you can think about player safety, but still allow people to play defense so that you can have, both sides of the ball, not just one.
I agree, especially like that Super Bowl with the Eagles and the Patriots, or that insane 51-45 game. Is people said it was one of the greatest games ever. And I was like, no, I kind of like a little like. I know people think that Patriots Super Bowl was boring where they beat the Rams 17-3, but I was impressed with the defensive wizardry in that game. I like some defense.
It's a chess match. So you like being able to see, both teams and both coaches going after each other with that. If it's just like, yep, touchdown, 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 kind of gets boring after a while. Yeah, it's exciting to see scores and everybody's doing their celebrations and stuff like that. But at some point you want to say, okay, stop, people. Let's see what it looks like when you actually have to compete against the other team and the defense is there and they're making an impact. How many times have you seen a fumble recovery or an interception? That's great for the excitement of the game. You're taking a lot of that stuff away. Don't do that. Allow the defense to be just as exciting as the offense.
I completely agree. I mean, that's how my Packers get back to playing some defense. They've been pretty lackluster recently. I mean, honestly, the Bears as well. That's what's been their bread and butter. Me and Matt have had this conversation. We want, as fun as it's been recently, I actually want it to be a rivalry, but yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that.
And talking about how they basically neuter defense, I mean, one of the things that they do, and they just recently banned it, and I was happy for it because when I was coaching, I did a program down here for middle schoolers before they go in and actually play high school football, and just basically get them into basics. And one of the things they did is the Seahawks basically popularized the shoulder tackle, and I was never a real big fan of it because, one, I grew up in the 90s. So, I mean, you're basically just taught to hit them and go through them. With the shoulder tackle, what basically happens is all the power and all that force gets put onto the tackler and their shoulder. And when they wrap up, and basically what they do is they basically clip at the legs, which it puts a lot more stress on the knees of the ball carrier and has led to a lot more injuries. Of course, they've found this out afterwards, but when I first saw it, I was like, I just don't know about that. I was always taught, tackle head up and lift up into them and explode. And it's just, yeah, like you said, the hit box is really small. I mean, you got people that, I understand, they were talking about possibly having the little padded things around their heads during actual games. I don't know if that was in college, but that's something I heard. And then the kickoff and everything. What's your ideas on how the new kickoff is about to happen?
That's a good question.
I mean, it's definitely going to be interesting. You're going to see probably a lot of stuff in the very beginning of the season where coaches are still trying to figure out how to be able to play based off the new rules. So I think you're going to see things a lot different from the beginning of the season to, say, middle of the season or the end of the season as they start figuring out some ways to try to take advantage of those new rules. So I think it'll be interesting. Not a big fan of making changes for the sake of making changes. They're talking about, well, we got to, take stuff out of the kicking game because it's too dangerous. Well, then they saw that, okay, well, we're taking the excitement out of the game too because we changed all these rules so that nobody could return or there's no incentive for them to return. then they're saying, okay, well, now we want to make sure that we can incentivize doing returns. It's like, well, isn't the reason why you banned it in the first place is because you cared about player safety? Well, what happened to that? So they're kind of being, hypocritical to some extent with that. But, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I've never been a fan of changing things just for the sake of changing things. I want to see changes for the better. And if you say that you're focused on player safety, then focus on player safety. Don't keep saying, well, okay, well, we worried about player safety, but it took all the excitement out of the game, so let's put it back in again. I don't understand that.
Especially when they're making other changes like we talked about, like the hip drop tackle. So Peter,
yeah, I mean, that's to me, that's a good one because, especially when you're playing on artificial turf, I mean, those ankles can rip up. You can tear apart all your ligaments in your knees and things like that with those types of tackles. I mean, we're seeing a lot nowadays when you're watching the film that people just don't have good tackling technique. They're just more of like, let me just hit the guy and see if he falls down. Well, these guys are too big, strong, and fast to just hit them and think that they're going to fall down. That's not going to happen, especially if you got a 5'10" running back that's 225 pounds. He's not going down with a single hit. You got to wrap up and bring him down. But, there's definitely ways that you can do that where you're not going to rip up somebody's knee. So I'm definitely in favor of, a change like that where you watch it, you're just like, I know somebody's getting hurt either now or on the next one. So I'm in favor of that one. But the kickoff rule, I'm a little more leery of that one.
Peter, I know you said you wrote down a few. What else you got?
Yeah. So obviously I love doing like the stats and just comparison of players and stuff like that. It's actually how I got into wanting to do like the podcasting and such. So, and I know it's hard to compare errors, especially now with the draft only being like 7 rounds as opposed to when it used to have like 18 or whatever it was, etc. If you had to pick like 2 or 3 years specifically, what years would you say had the best overall draft classes?
Well, if you're looking at quarterbacks, you're probably talking the 83 draft. That's definitely one that's in there. It was 65, I think, for the Bears, where they took Butkus and Sayers. And you've got that in one draft for one team. I mean, how can you say that's not a great draft? I know the Steelers had one in the 70s. For the life of me, I can't remember the specific year, but yeah, I would say those 3 are probably the ones that I'd be taking a look at.
Okay.
I think it was 1972, and that's when they drafted Lynn Swann, Jack Lambert, John Stallworth, and I'm trying to remember the 4th Hall of Famer that they got in one draft.
That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some great drafts in history, but the ones I mentioned, I think, are probably at the top of my list, just off the top of my head.
I think Mike Wesper.
Now you're going to make me look it up.
I was sitting there. I was like, yeah, no, I'm legitimately trying to figure out.
It was funny as you looked that up. I was actually the reason I liked that 154-51 Chiefs and Rams game was actually solely for fantasy purposes because I went from being 55 points down at the start of the night to winning by 10. So there you go.
That'll do it.
I'm gonna stop using my internet because it's messing up. But 85 one was one I saw when I looked it up. I looked it up too because I wasn't. That was a good question. I wasn't ready for that one. But the Bruce Smith, Jerry Rice, Andre Reed, Kevin Green, Chris Dolman. That was a pretty good one. But yeah, the ones you said absolutely stand out. I was thinking 80. Yeah, I was thinking early 80s as well. So awesome question, Peter. I like that. That was good. I got a question for you that we hadn't really hit yet. Can you tell me a little bit about the Sports History Network? I looked that up and that was pretty cool. There's so many podcasts on there. Can you share a little bit about that and how that became to be, like how that was founded?
Yeah, Arnie Chapman founded that. Basically, he had his own podcast, Football History Dude, and then he started bringing in other people that were sports history fans. I think it started off with mainly football, but now it's expanded to all sports. So you've got football there, you got baseball, basketball. I think there's an Olympics one. I'm not sure, there may be a wrestling one as well. So a lot of different podcasts, a lot of different points of view. So yeah, I mean, it's something that's continually grown, and you want to talk about, some of the most knowledgeable historians out there, that's one place you're going to want to go to. And we even have some of our instructors that have podcasts over there. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely support the Sports History Network, and I encourage everyone to go over there and take a look at the different podcasts that are there. I guarantee you're going to find something that you're going to like and want to subscribe to.
Very cool. I didn't know if you guys could check that out. Like when I was looking up, I was doing my homework on you too as well. I like to, med dive deep in, but I try to also hit it with some questions, and we both come up with some stuff. So, all right, Peter, did you have any other questions? I still have a little bit more, but I wanted to say,
got two more, but the one I'm most interested in was because you had mentioned that they're starting to look at like the more recent players in terms of the Hall of Fame and stuff. So I wanted to bring up two that I've actually had like personal interactions with and see what you think their chances of getting into Canton would be. That would be Matt Forte and Charles Tillman.
Ooh.
Tillman, I think, is probably going to get in, but I think Devin Hester kind of hurt him a little bit. So if you're looking at people that are doing returns and stuff like that, but I think he's got enough of a case as a defensive back in order to be able to get in. Matt Forte, I think it's going to be a little more difficult for him to get in there. I think there's just too many other people that are probably going to be ahead of him in the queue. But of those two, I think Tillman's got the best shot.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I actually got to meet him doing. He was doing a event for the charity that he actually founded and runs, and the most down to earth human being I've ever met in terms of like pro athletes and stuff. Literally was waiting at the entry gate, and hi, I'm Charles. Thank you for coming. I was like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you get people, especially when they're working on their charities and stuff, you're seeing a new side to them. You're not seeing the pro football player. You're not seeing that. You are seeing the real person. This is something that they're very passionate about, something that means a lot to them. So, yeah, I mean, you want to be able to see more players in that type of an environment, seeing what really drives and motivates them. And that's something I try to do on my podcast when I'm interviewing players is, I want to find out what drives and motivates them. And it's usually some sort of charitable organization or football camp that they run for kids or whatever the case may be. There's something that they are very passionate about. And I want to try to find out what that is and get them to talk about it, why it's so important to them.
Awesome.
I love it. I've got, if you guys are good with this, we can cycle back to some, but I want to ask him about this upcoming season a little bit.
Yeah.
What did you make of the Buffalo Bills offseason, Ken? This just most recent. Did you like their moves? What were your thoughts on that?
I think they didn't have much of a choice, really, because they were really up against the cap. They were over the cap, so they had to make some cuts, and they couldn't make a lot of free agent moves. They brought in some people, but I think it was more of they had to clear cap space. And so this particular season, I think, was just getting them back into good cap health, and then hopefully set things up for next season where they can maybe start bringing in some impact players in free agency, but focusing on the draft, making sure that they try to get quality people in the draft and just try to go from there. I think, losing Diggs, there's pluses and minuses to that. I mean, he did have some issues in some games, but other games he was, lighting it up. So be interesting to see the young receivers on the Bills, see how they're going to step up and be able to try to keep the Bills relevant this season. Their division's going to be tough. You've got Miami in there that's playing well. You've got the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is coming back, so they're not going to be a slouch. Patriots are definitely going to get better. I don't think they're going to compete for the title in the division this year, but still, I mean, you've got three great teams in that division, plus you got to compete against the Kansas Cities of the world. You got to compete against the Cincinnatis of the world, against the Baltimores of the world. I mean, you look at that AFC North division, they're just going to beat the hell out of people. So it's going to be tough for any team in the AFC. But yeah, I think definitely in the AFC East, there's going to be some battles between those top 3 teams.
Oh, absolutely. I had y'all tied for the division lead with the Jets. If assuming Rodgers stays healthy, this is going to put some strain on Josh Allen, though. We're going to see how many. He reminds me. I'm curious what you think of this comparison. He really reminds me of a modern day Brett Favre, which is high praise, and he puts you on a roller coaster. I've had him in fantasy. I've watched him so much, and he either makes one of the most special plays you'll ever see, or a back-breaking interception. I'm curious how this year's going to go. They kind of leaned towards the run last year after they fired their OC, and James Cook, I mean, until the last couple of games, they really rode him. So I think it's going to be, that offense is going to be interesting this year. I've been hearing some stuff on Dalton Kincaid. I'm curious if he'll kind of be their de facto one, or if it'll be Curtis Samuel. They had so much turnover, and not only on offense, they had a bunch of turnover on defense. They were kind of like the Chargers. They were in such cap hell, they had to make some moves. So
yeah, I think they lost most of their defensive secondary, in the offseason. At least, a lot of the starters they lost. So yeah, they really got to replace that depth to make sure they're going to be good in the secondary. But yeah, on offense, that change in offensive coordinator definitely changed how they utilized Josh Allen and how they tried to really build up a run game, because that was one of the biggest things that they struggled with, is their entire running game was Josh Allen. And you can't have that and be successful. You're going to get the guy hurt, and that's what we saw happen, is he got hurt and he struggled after getting hurt. So yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how things progress on that, especially with the fact that they've had to cut a lot of people from that offense.
Okay, hopefully we can hear me. Can you guys hear me?
We could hear you before that.
Okay.
Double.
Sorry, my computer went out, and I'm very annoyed about it. Sorry. Everybody can hear me?
Yeah.
I can't hear you guys. Hold on.
We can hear you. So, question for you. Who's your favorite Bills player of all time?
Okay, there we go.
Favorite Bills player, I would say probably Bruce Smith.
Ooh, good one.
Like that.
But yeah, if you want to talk about, say you want to talk about people that should be in the Hall of Fame from the Bills, I mean, I think Steve Tasker and Tom Sestak. So definitely big fans of them, and big fans of a lot of the 60s players. Had a chance to meet a lot of them. So very privileged to be able to have had a chance to talk to some of them. Some of them are still around, some are not, but it's always fun talking to a lot of those players, and I've been able to talk to players throughout their history, and especially the ones from the All-America Football Conference, not the same franchise, but interviewed all the surviving members from that team when I was writing my book on that franchise. So yeah, I always just love talking to those Buffalo players.
Sorry about my internet there. I had one other big question for you, but I wanted to hit some more stuff on this season. Other than obviously this show, I'm just kidding. What was your favorite experience going and speaking with somebody else or contributing? I saw that Erod, and this was awesome. Sports Illustrated, National Football Post. I'm going to blow you up for a second. Packer Report, Coffin Corner, Cold Hard Football Facts. I know I'm missing some. You're part of the Professional Football Research Association. You have your podcast. We've already brought up that you've spoke with Chris Berman. Oh my gosh, there's so many. The list is endless. But Brian Urlacher, I saw Michael Lombardi. I was just like, wow. What was your favorite experience hopping on someone else's show or contributing to something else?
There's a lot of it. I mean, it's one of those things where it happens a lot. You don't sit back and think about it, but I mean, I thought about the fact that the Wall Street Journal had me on speed dial whenever they wanted to do football related articles. They quoted me on the front page twice.
That's cool.
I've been on the History Channel podcast, been on ESPN Radio, Fox Sports Radio. Yeah, it's one of those I forget everything that I've done. But Rolling Stone magazine interviewed me for an article. We see that every year because it was on Thanksgiving football. Deadspin interviewed me. So each one is its own unique experience, and I love doing all that stuff, and I love not only being guests but also having guests come in and that I get to interview. So seeing it from both sides, I think, helps me become a better interviewer, because I see all these other people coming in, the questions that they ask and how they ask it and how they put their shows together. That helps me become a better interviewer. So just the give and take on all that, I love the experience.
That's a great answer. I like that. Good stuff. Peter, I got to ask him about this season, but what was your last question?
Actually, it's going into the season. I'm gonna do a two-parter here because you had made me think of one that now that I know he's a Bills fan, I actually wanted to ask him about a specific pick they made, and then of course the one that matters to us most. So when they had traded the one where Kansas City ended up picking Xavier Worthy, knowing that you guys needed receivers too, what was your reaction to that? Because I remember my first one was the Bills do remember they're in the AFC also, right? And then for the Bears one specifically, assuming our wide receiver core stays healthy, which obviously with Keenan Allen is a huge if, but I'm hoping so here. What do you think are realistic expectations for Caleb this year?
All right. Xavier Worthy, the stuff that I hear from the Bills is that they were worried about whether he was going to be able to play in the Buffalo weather. And that's why they decided not to go with him, and they decided to move their pick to Kansas City. It does make sense with Kansas City as one of your biggest rivals in the AFC, why you would want to make that change, that trade. But they thought that he wasn't the right fit for what they wanted to do. And so I've got to trust them, because I'm not in the draft room with them to know how they evaluated it or anything. So we're going to find out, because isn't Kansas City playing in Buffalo this year? So we'll see if Xavier Worthy can play in the Buffalo weather. So it's going to prove them right or prove them wrong, whatever the case may be. It's
I was
one
concerned
game
about that.
data set, but, it is what it is. Now, as far as your second question, how is Caleb going to do? I think there's going to be far too much pressure on him to repeat CJ Stroud from last year. And I think that's unfair to him, because not the same system, not the same people that you're playing with. I think that's too much pressure to put on him. I think that he's going to have his ups and downs this season. I don't expect a Houston Texans type turnaround with the Bears this year, but I think they are going to be better as a result of all of the talent, like you had mentioned, that they brought in on the offensive side, plus on the defensive side. So I think they're really putting together a decent team, and I think they're going to do well. The problem is that you're running up against the Packers, you're running up against the Lions. No idea what's going to happen with the Vikings this year. That's a complete unknown. I'm not even going to try to guess that one. But I think that the fact that you've got the Packers and the Lions in there, plus I haven't looked at your schedule to see who else you're playing, what other divisions you're playing. But yeah, it's not going to be an easy road for them. I do see them being better, but I just don't see them competing for the title of the division this year. I think that's something that's a couple of years down the road when they'd be able to do that, but not this year.
Yeah, I had them finishing like within the realm of the wild card race. I think I had like 10-7 as of right now. So we'll see. Mainly because that's what they should have been last year if they'd finished off the 3 games that they should have. So.
Okay, I got one for you. I like the Caleb question, though. That was a good one. If you had to make a Super Bowl prediction for this year, who do you think makes the Super Bowl?
Well, I'm obligated to say the Bills.
There you go.
Bills Packers. I'm just kidding.
I still think that it's probably going to be – there's 3 teams that I would say. It's going to be San Francisco, Green Bay, and Philadelphia.
Oh, wow.
I would think if I had to pick from those, I'd probably still think a repeat of San Francisco because they are an absolute machine. Just all the talent that they have on their team. I think it's going to be tough for the Packers, the Lions, the Eagles to be able to get past them. Cowboys are going to be up there. What they're going to do in the playoffs, I don't know, but they're definitely going to compete for the division title, if not win it again. So if I had to pick, I'm going to say Bills in San Francisco.
I like that. The one team I've actually got in there. I think a lot of it comes down to Dan Campbell and Jared Goff as the Lions. It's hard to repeat after you lose a Super Bowl. This Super Bowl hangover thing has just been such. The 49ers, though, would be the one team to bucket if they can stay healthy. And health hurt them in the Super Bowl. So I'm curious if Debo and Kittle and McCaffrey can stay healthy and if they can get Trent Williams into camp, because that's going to be crucial for them. They need all their parts to have that machine operating. And then if they do, I think they're one of the few teams that can slay the 49ers or whoever makes it out of the AFC. Hopefully,
and you got to look
too.
out for Baltimore as well in the AFC.
I agree.
Because, you know, they've really got themselves a running game now. So it's a matter of, you know, Henry staying healthy, but then you had Lamar, you had those receivers in there, and Andrews coming back, being healthy. Hopefully he stays healthy. They can make a legitimate run against Cincinnati, against Kansas City, against Buffalo, against the Jets, whoever's coming out of the AFC. I think that, you know, they can give whoever from the NFC comes out. I think they're going to give them a really good run for it. And I would not be surprised to see Baltimore make it this year as well.
Yeah.
Love it. I've got another one for you in a minute, but I want to make sure I'm not stealing another one from Peter or Matt here. I'm excited to talk some football, obviously. Matt, did you have any more?
No, I'm good right now. I'm just
Awesome,
sitting here and basking in the wisdom.
I know this is fun. Peter, did you have any other ones?
Actually, it was observation with yours, and then I do have one final one that I thought of. Was looking at like the 49ers and how they were handling camp so far. It's looking, because they have like the surplus of talent in their secondary right now. It's looking like they're actually going to be moving Hufanga down to take Greenlaw's place until he can come back. So that way they're feeling like they're not going to have to try and rush him back into being ready to play. So they've got someone that already knows the system and basically was playing that position to fill in for him during the season anyway. So they're not going to be missing as much. And then when you can move Hufanga back to the secondary, that makes their entire defense absolutely terrifying again. But so going forward this season, especially because they are apparently going to be testing them in the preseason games and stuff like that, what are your thoughts on these supposed safety helmets? Because I actually see more injuries happening with them than without them.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a potential, especially when you think that, okay, they have that false sense of security. And so they're going to go in and they're not going to tackle the way they should tackle. They're going to make adjustments and stuff like that. And I'm all for safety, but we need to make sure we're teaching proper technique. And if you're teaching proper techniques so that people are tackling the way they're supposed to tackle instead of just trying to make a highlight film, I think you're going to see some reductions in injuries because, you know, people aren't going to be leading with their head. They're not going to be blind going into a tackle or anything like that. So I'd be worried about the false sense of security with the safety helmets. It's it's great to improve the equipment. There's a lot of great stuff out there as far as equipment is concerned that's going to help people. I just don't want to get that false sense of security.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking of too, just with like the added force, even with it being rubber. I mean, we already saw, and I hate even thinking about this play, but we'd already seen what happened with Damar Hamlin and stuff. And this just seems like it's adding more potential for that to happen again.
Yeah, and you got to take a look at how concussions are actually happening too. It's not just, leading with your head. I mean, any sort of concussive blow to your head is going to cause a problem. I mean, you can get hit up underneath the jaw. Well, the helmet's not going to do anything about that. You can still get yourself a concussion. You get people smacking you from the sides. If you're just focused on the top of the head because people are leading with their helmets, what about the sides? What about underneath? What about coming straight in through your face mask? There's a lot of other ways that you can get hurt. And I think that, there are protective equipment out there that's going to be able to handle things. There are better quality mouth guards out there that are going to be able to help you reduce those concussions. I mean, we've got a sponsor on our show that's got a revolutionary mouth guard that helps reduce concussions. The data that he has shows that it's reduced it by 99% by the people that have been wearing it. And you've got Daniel Sorensen is a guy that that wears it, and he hasn't had a concussion since he started wearing it.
Yeah.
So,
oh, that's awesome. Because I actually had 2 from playing basketball and just landing wrong and stuff. So,
oh yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can get a concussion, and so they need to look at all of those things, and not just what can they put on the crown of your helmet.
Yeah.
I've had a few too, and not only one from football actually. So yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize it's not really the big hits that really give you the concussions. It's the constant hitting, like you said. I played offense and defensive line when I was playing, and you're basically hitting nonstop for the whole play. And with the advancements they actually had with the helmets, my wife asked me if we ever had kids, would I let him play football? And I said, I'm not going to influence his decision on yes or no. I'm going to let that be his own decision. And I will talk to him about what I dealt with afterwards. But I said, you're thinking about, that's like me saying my grandfather sitting me down when he had the little leather helmet with no face guard saying, hey, you might not want to play it because the equipment ain't that great. It's phenomenal now. So, I mean, it's, literally, I put on a helmet one time, before I handed it off to one of the kids, and it felt like a cloud going over my head. I was like, this is so comfortable. I could go to sleep. But it's just with the advancements that they had, like you said, with the mouth guards, the helmets, the cleats, everything. Injuries are going to happen. It's just part of the game. I consider football players to be modern day gladiators in a good way, because you constantly are going to be in a battle with the person across from you. But the days of, where you basically get your bell rung, they wave the smelling salt in your face and they're like, oh, he's fine, he's awake, send him back out there. Those are long gone because of all the precautions that they have with the concussion protocol and everything like that. So it's, you're actually taught as a coach now to actually see the signs. So you actually go to a class to learn these things. And, I think as far as the medical breakthroughs that they've had, I mean, Ken's right. I mean, you got a mouth guard that can keep you from getting knocked out plus.
Yeah. And you take a look at the helmets too. You can make all the safety improvements that you want, but take a look at it. When
you can
people are
pump 'em
getting
up.
hit, look how easy it is to have that helmet fall off. So it is not being worn correctly. If it can come off that easily, it's not being worn correctly, which means it's not giving you the safety protection. So what's the point in putting all of that extra stuff in there if you're not going to wear it correctly?
Yeah.
Exactly. Really quick, my dad keeps doing it. Hi, Dad. He's watching. I just got to say this. Your guys' draft picks, you had one of Med's favorite players, Ray Davis, Cedric Van Pran. I really like him in the fit. Ulafoshio from Washington, the linebacker. Cole Bishop was a good pickup, and Dwayne Carter. I'm going to be curious how the Bills implement those. I got a question. It's one of my last ones because I know we got to go in a little bit here. Was there any NFL games you went to in person that stood out? We don't have to do the favorite thing again, but was there any NFL games you went to, you've been to that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I would say if you're talking about a Bills game, there was one where the Patriots came to Buffalo. It was a freezing rain. So my brother and I are there. We were season ticket holders at the time. And when we left that stadium, we were absolutely numb because of just the freezing rain just pouring on you the entire game. I think it took me probably 6 or 7 hours before I could start getting feeling back in my body because it was just frozen. You can barely move. You're just numb. So being at that game was obviously something I would want to forget, but something that's always there. And then, another one that's non-Buffalo related, I was at Super Bowl 24. That was the 55-10 game. So, yeah, that was definitely an experience being down there in New Orleans for that Super Bowl. Even though it wasn't a close game, it's always fun to be at a Super Bowl. So just enjoying that experience.
I hope I can eventually make one. I went to a conference championship once, and that was pretty awesome. I went to I think it was 08 or 09, the Kurt Warner in Arizona against Philadelphia. Donovan McNabb, Andy Reid. Kurt Warner won. They went to the Super Bowl, almost beat the Steelers. But yeah, that one, that was pretty cool. Went to a Packer game a couple of years ago with my wife too. That was awesome. My first one as an adult. Hoping to go back to more. It was really cool. It was the one where Charles Woodson was inducted in the Hall of Fame. And ironically, Rasul Douglas, who was not with y'all at the time, who I'm still sad we lost because that was a terrible move for a third-round draft pick. But he had a pick six in the game against Stafford. That was back in 21 November. So, yeah, that was pretty cool. But, yeah, that was awesome. Do you guys have any final questions or thoughts? Matt, Pete?
I got one, actually. Pete, I'll let you go first.
He killed me with that Arizona reference because I still think Fitzgerald should have gotten a ring out of that, but that's a whole different discussion. For this season, I guess it was going with the Bears offseason as a whole. Obviously, I know you said there's a lot of pressure on them in terms of like the expectations, especially with Caleb. But if you had to like say how their offseason as a whole went, what would you give them as far as grade, etc.?
I think they did very well in the offseason. I mean, they addressed needs that they had. They added the weapons necessary for trying to set Caleb up to succeed. They knew they were going to take him, so they wanted to make sure that, he's got the running backs, he's got the receivers, he's got everything that he needs to be able to succeed. So I would give him a very high grade. I mean, whether you give him an A or B plus or something like that. But they did what they needed to do. And so you can't really fault them for that. Whether Caleb is able to succeed or not, whether he's, going to be able to make that transition to the pros, we're not going to know until he gets out there and plays. But they did what they should have done, which is to get all the right players and to get themselves who they think is their franchise quarterback. And now it's up to the coaching staff in order to get the most out of all those players.
Yeah, makes sense. No, I'm one of those ones where I'm still kind of conflicted on it because I love at least what I've seen from him in the training camp that they've released and stuff so far. But I would have loved to see what Justin could have done with a core like this too, because he never had anything close to this.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, if he had that same talent around him, maybe things would have been different for him in Chicago. But
yeah,
he's there in Pittsburgh right now competing with Russell Wilson. So we'll see what happens.
Matt, what you got?
So just rewind my coolest moment, and I've been to a Bears game, but I only went to Atlanta, and my wife is actually talking about going up to Chicago for our 10-year anniversary to actually go to Soldier Field for a game there. And I was like, do we go in the winter? And she's like, no. But she's a Midwest girl, so she lived in Pittsburgh for a little bit. But my coolest moment was actually during the Hall of Fame, and I just so happened to be, as we're walking back from the car, I can't remember exactly what event we were at, but Bob Lilly, Mr. Cowboy himself, actually walked alongside me. And like Amy, I looked at Amy, I was like, it's Bob Lilly. Who's that? And I was like, it's Mr. Cowboy. I said, and I'm a Bears fan, and she's like, I'm going full groupie mode, just and all those guys present. And it was just like, she was like, I just don't get it, and I was like, you never will. But speaking about the Hall of Fame, there's a couple things that I think that are really cool that you actually have with the Football Learning Academy. One of which is the Hall of Honor, which I think is really cool. I'll let you elaborate on that. And I figured that if you would like to, people, if you get a chance to check out this website, please, it's just amazing what he has. And he has, besides Mr. Ken himself, he has 4 legit instructors that really know their stuff. It's www.footballlearningacademy.com. I say check it out. And Mr. Ken, if you want to discuss the Hall of Honor, please, by all means, sir.
Yeah, so what we wanted to do with the Hall of Honor is try to honor some of the players that are overlooked by the Hall of Fame, especially some of the older players that played prior to the beginning of the NFL. But we're also taking a look at some of the other contributors. So you'd have assistant coaches, owners, anything like that. So we have the criteria listed on the Hall of Honor page as far as what we look at. We poll our instructors to come up with who we feel belongs in the Hall of Honor. And that's how we put those classes together. So we've got 2 more that went in this year. And it's something where I think people need to really know more about some of the other people that have either played or have contributed in some way to the NFL, even before the NFL even existed. So we're trying to educate people on those players, on those people that contributed. And that's really what we're trying to do with the Hall of Honor. So, yeah, you go there to our website, football-learning-academy.com, and you've got the blog posts, you got the Hall of Honor, you've got the classes, you got the podcast, you have the social media links. I mean, we try to make it easy for everybody to find everything there. And you can sort the blog posts, you can sort the classes to the types of things that you're looking for. So I think there's something there for everybody, and we're constantly adding new content to the website. So I'd say keep checking it out.
Can I just say really quick, we've got a few more minutes. I don't want to run into, we're a part of Shady Sports Network, and I want to say thank you to him for having us on a second season. But I want to say thank you to you for coming in with all of your knowledge that I couldn't honestly hope to approach. But just thank you for joining as we continue to grow. I'm almost a year in now to have you on, and I didn't even want to focus on all of your guests, just talk to you. And I just want to say thank you for joining us. It was very insightful. It was a lot of fun talking football with you. I could talk for another hour, honestly, but I want to say thank you so much for joining us. And we really appreciate it. Seriously.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you having me on your show.
Thank you, sir. Really quick because we've got like 5-ish minutes. Can you just tell everybody again where to find you? Any little, like, you don't have to say names, any stuff to look for this season? The floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, football-learning-academy.com. That's where we have the Football Learning Academy. If you're looking for my personal website, it's kencrippen.com. So between those two, you're going to see everything that I've been working on. And as far as what's coming up this season, try to have some really special guests in there. Like I was alluding to earlier, we're looking at a Hall of Famer in Giants history. That's going to start off in September. So keep an eye out for that. And, I just want to keep trying to tell the stories of these players and being able to talk about what really drives and motivates them and inspires them, and really helping people get to know these players as people instead of football players, what they're really like as a person. So I'd say go check out the podcast. There's a lot of great interviews there. I try to span different eras, try to span different teams, different types of people, different things that they're interested in, so that hopefully there's going to be something there that you're going to enjoy. So football-learning-academy.com.
I think my dad, I've told him about it. I think if he checks it out, he'd absolutely go nuts. He would love it. Everything I've gotten to listen to so far, and I'm going to be listening to some more episodes. But seriously, thank you. Peter, do you have any final thoughts?
This is honestly an amazing honor just to be able to talk with you and such, because I loved going back into the history of it, and to have someone with this level of knowledge is just incredible.
And where can people find your show, Peter?
It's going to actually be coming up. We're going into the Midwestern chaos where I get to deal with another Packers fan. Why I'm doing this to myself, I don't know, but we'll see how it goes here. It's going to be primarily focused just on recapping and then looking forward to the next week for both of our teams. And we are hoping to have a couple former players, two of whom I actually mentioned in a question on here at some point this season.
I'm going to be having a Packer player, Mark Cannon, on my first one. Probably in November. We're going to set a date soon, but he knows Bill, so I'm really excited. So it's going to be awesome. So finally, it's cool the second season to get a player on. I would. That's my hope, is to expand into that realm. So yeah. Med, do you want to tell everybody where to find shots and any final thoughts?
This is going to be a very interesting season. We literally, as far as Blitz is concerned, we are packed to the gills.
I don't have my notebook. We've got yeah.
Well, we could do a whole nother hour on that. But you can find me at Shots, and I have a co-host, Seth. We basically talk pro football, college football, and every now and then we'll sprinkle in some NBA. But for the most part, we're football based. We will be back on August 27th. He's taking the rest of the summer off, so that's cool. I got plenty going on with Blitz as it is. And in the future, we'll be talking about some NFC North panels and stuff like that. But it's going to be a very good year. We got an SEC writer coming in for Blitz, and then Fun Football Podcast has quite a few people coming in as well, which I'll be toying with that until the August 27th when my show comes back. So, and
boom.
I just recently joined up with the Shady Network, so looking forward to it. It's going to be a great second season for both shows, all three really, and we'll see what happens in the future.
And we'll be on Tuesdays at 7:30 moving forward. Most likely next week. That'll be every week. Blitz will be at Tuesdays at 7:30. Fun Football Podcast will be on, other than next week, it'll normally be Fridays at 8 p.m. And we've got a fun show next week on Thursday for Blitz, just because they weren't available. Talking Football will be joining us. I am Izac with Fun Football Podcast, and I want to say thank you, everybody, for listening. Go check out, I'm on Twitter. That's where I met Ken. On here, obviously, on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you to Shady Sports for having us, and this was a lot of fun, guys. So thank you, Ken, again, and we'll see you next week.
Rock on.
This is harder on my phone.